The following case is the result of a lead furnished to the Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization by Bob Gribble of Phenomenon Research Hotline, and also contributions from field investigator Ed O. Brown. The name and the witnesses and some of the locations have been changed to protect witnesses as requested. Mrs. Pat Norris, age 28, lived with her husband Carl and 3 children in a suburb of Mobile, Alabama. On the night of February 3rd, 1983, she had visited a friend in Mobile, and when the friend's husband arrived home from work, Miss Norris left and headed home on Highway 90. She had turned off the highway, and about 90 minutes ride from her home, she heard an explosion. At this point, her car began to vibrate and continued vibrating, making it very difficult for her to steer. She turned off the road she was on and stopped the car, and then opened the door and leaned out to see what could possibly be going on. She decided to get out of the car and check on the engine and see if that had been causing the trouble. After investigating, it was clear that there was nothing troubling about the engine. Mrs. Norris continued driving, and the vibrating would soon stop. She turned onto another road and saw that the woods ahead were brilliantly illuminated. At first, she thought that this was a helicopter search in progress because of the lights, and she became very frightened. She again stopped the car, and at this point saw a huge object about half a mile west of her. She now felt the explosion that she had heard earlier, as the object was coming down over a clay and gravel pit in the vicinity. The object was huge, and she estimated it to be 7 to 8 stories high, around 70 to 80 feet. She also said that it was about 6 telephone poles wide, or what would amount to 200 feet. The object appeared to be moving toward her very slowly, at around 4 to 5 miles per hour. That evening had been clear and cool, and she had driven with the car's windows closed. However, after the explosion, she noted a chopping wind with a high-pitched sound and a roaring sound as well. She particularly noted the whipping of the wind, similar to a tornado. When the object reached a point fairly close, it stopped, and all of the noise stopped as well. It was completely silent, and Miss Norris lost all the fear that she had felt before. She then got out of the car to get a better look at the object. She strained to take in every detail, feeling like a child with unbelievable happiness. She estimated the time duration to be around 5 minutes that she was looking at the object. As the craft appeared, Mrs. Norris's attention was drawn to a top deck with a very long window, and she viewed around 20 to 30 aliens, apparently oblivious of her presence. They were walking about as if they were changing shifts. The wall behind them was curved and white. Mrs. Norris described the beings as being pale-skinned, dressed in white one-piece suits, and she judged them to be around our height, around 5'10", and slender as well. She noted that their chests were larger than ours, and the top of the head was more prominent, with no hair. She also noted that there was nothing out of the ordinary about their eyes. One thing that did draw her attention, though, was the great grace of their movements, and she described the atmosphere as being sterile. The very bottom of the craft was formed into a cross made with 1-foot square mirrors and an observation deck hung down and around the bottom. In this case, unlike the top deck, the people were peering out while overhead, and she heard a very low-pitched but clearly audible, almost like a growl, announcing coming from one of the area observation decks now closest to her. Mrs. Norris said she didn't believe that they realized she was there. She also noted that she saw 4 pipes projecting 6 to 8 feet out from the craft, set in 3 or 4 foot square boxes. She thought it looked like a weapon. They looked like a weapon. After this, the craft took a southerly turn as it went from where she was parked. She said it was staying in a wooded area and did not cross Highway 90 again. She believed it was possibly doubling back towards Irvington and Pascagoula. As it lit up the wooded area and everything underneath it as it moved off, it had white spotlights and red lights that intermingled. She told Mr. Brown she had prayed she might have such a sighting. Interestingly, she had extensive dreams both prior to and after the February 4th incident. The later dreams contain a detailed physical examination performed by the creatures and a scan of her emotions. One can only question whether she was abducted and tests were performed. After the object was out of sight, Mrs. Norris continued on home and arrived about 1 o'clock